The night began like every other business event my husband dragged me to: champagne, fake laughter, people pretending to care who wins or loses. The casino was louder than I expected. Every sound had purpose: coins clinking, glasses touching, a roulette wheel spinning somewhere behind the noise. It was a place where people came to lose beautifully. He was in his element, my husband, the investor, shaking hands and smiling too wide, wearing success like a tailored suit. I stood beside him, smiling when expected, nodding when polite. But my mind wandered. The lights were dizzying, gold, red, smoke curling in slow motion beneath chandeliers that looked too heavy to stay standing. I drifted away from him, pretending to look for the restroom, but really just following the hum of voices and the soft rhythm of jazz from the lounge. That's where I saw him. He wasn't playing. He was just watching, leaning against a column, drink in hand. Eyes fixed on the roulette table like he already knew every number that would fall. There was something about him, quiet confidence, the kind that comes from knowing when to stop. When his gaze found mine, it didn't feel accidental. It felt like the moment you realize the dealer has been watching you the whole game. He didn't smile right away. Just studied me for a few seconds too long. As if he could tell I didn't belong to this world, but I wanted to. Then, finally, that half-smile appeared. Slow, knowing, dangerous in its calmness. And before I could look away, I smiled back. My husband called my name from across the room. The sound broke the spell. But only long enough for me to remember I wasn't supposed to feel anything here. When I turned back, the man was still looking at me. And for some reason I thought, this is what losing control must look like before it even begins. He found me again 15 minutes later, just as I was pretending to be fascinated by a roulette table. The air was heavy with perfume, cigar smoke, and the quiet desperation of people praying to chance. I wasn't playing, just watching the ball spin, wondering what it would feel like to risk something real. Then, I felt him before I saw him. That same presence, calm, deliberate. He stood beside me, close enough for me to catch the faint scent of whiskey and cedar. "Don't bet on black tonight," he said softly, eyes still on the wheel. "Why not?" I asked. "Because you're not lucky, you're curious. And curiosity always loses." I turned to face him, trying not to smile. His suit was simple, but perfectly tailored. No tie. The kind of man who didn't need to shout to be noticed. There was something dangerous in his calmness, not arrogance, just control. He wasn't there to play. He was there to watch. "I don't gamble," I said. He smiled faintly. "You're here, aren't you?" The dealer announced the next round, and people threw chips onto the table like confessions. He handed me one, smooth, cold, black with a gold edge. "For luck," he said. "I thought you said I'd lose." "You will," he said. "But not tonight." I placed the chip on red, not because I believed in winning, but because I wanted to see what he'd do. The wheel spun, round and round, a blur of light and motion. And when the ball landed on red, he didn't look surprised. He looked at me. "That's the thing about luck," he said quietly. "It likes being challenged." My husband's voice echoed somewhere in the distance, laughing, talking, living in his own world. I felt his presence and this man's gaze at the same time. And the contrast hit me like a wave, one familiar and dull. The other new and electric, alive. "You shouldn't be here," I told him. He leaned closer, just enough for his breath to graze my ear. "Neither should you." The words weren't flirtation, they were a mirror. He saw right through me, and I hated that it didn't scare me. He straightened his jacket. "Come to the lounge when you're done pretending." And before I could answer, he walked away, slow, certain, leaving the smell of risk behind him. I stood there, my hand still on the table, watching the dealer collect chips from people who'd lost. Somewhere deep down, I realized I'd just placed the biggest bet of my life. And it had nothing to do with roulette. The lounge was quieter than the casino floor, dim lights, red velvet chairs, the kind of jazz that made everything feel slower, softer, more dangerous. I told myself I just needed a drink. That's why I followed him here. But I knew that was a lie before I even ordered. He was already there, sitting at the bar like he owned the stillness around him. No drink in his hand this time, just that same unreadable calm. When he saw me, he didn't smile, just tilted his head slightly, as if to say, "I knew you'd come." I sat beside him. "Do you always invite strangers to follow you?" I asked, keeping my tone light. "Only the ones who look like they're pretending to be somewhere else," he said. The bartender placed a glass in front of me, champagne, though I hadn't ordered it. He nodded toward it. "You look like someone who needs a reason to stay." I took a sip, trying to hide the tremor in my hand. His gaze never left me. It wasn't predatory, it was patient. Like he was waiting for me to say the truth I hadn't admitted to myself yet. "You don't talk like the people downstairs," I said. "That's because I'm not here to win," he replied. "I'm here to watch people forget why they started playing." I laughed quietly. "And what do you think I'm here for?" He leaned in, eyes narrowing just slightly. "To remember what it feels like to want something." The words landed exactly where they shouldn't have. I looked away, pretending to watch the reflections in the glass behind the bar. Gold lights. People pretending to be lucky. And me, pretending I wasn't one of them. He asked about my husband, casually, like asking the weather. I told him he was downstairs, probably making someone else feel important. He nodded slowly. "So you're both playing different games tonight?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I'm not playing anything." He smiled. "Then why do you keep looking at me like you're afraid to lose?" The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was heavy, the kind that makes the air feel thicker. Like everything unspoken has a pulse. Finally, he said, "Let me show you something." He took a single chip from his pocket, not red or black, but gold, and placed it on the bar between us. "One bet," he said. "If it lands in your favor, you walk away now. If not..." He paused, his voice dropping lower. "You stay." He spun the chip with his finger. And for a moment the world blurred. The sound of the casino faded. The lights seemed softer, slower. The chip fell flat, gold side up. He smiled faintly. "Looks like you lose." I should have stood up. I didn't. The next song started, something slow, with a piano that sounded like a secret. He gestured toward the small dance floor. "Then dance with me," he said. And I did. Because in that moment, losing felt exactly like winning. The music was soft, but the air wasn't. It was heavy, with perfume, with risk, with the kind of silence that says more than words ever could. The lights in the lounge shifted, deep amber and gold, glinting off the glasses, brushing his face in pieces of warmth. I don't remember walking to the dance floor. I just remember being there. He offered his hand without a word. I hesitated, not because I didn't want to take it, but because I already knew what it meant if I did. Still, my fingers found his. His hand was warm, his touch careful, but not tentative. The kind of touch that asks permission, and already knows the answer. We moved slowly. Not really dancing, just swaying, breathing, pretending the world wasn't watching. I could hear the faint sound of roulette wheels in the distance. Spinning endlessly, like fate playing its own private joke. His voice broke through the music, low and close. "You don't seem like someone who belongs in places like this." "Neither do you," I said. He smiled. "Maybe that's why we found each other." I laughed quietly, the sound nervous, fragile. He leaned closer, close enough for me to feel his breath on my neck. "Tell me something," he whispered. "When's the last time you felt alive?" I didn't answer. He didn't need me to. The moment hung there, suspended, quiet, terrifying. Then the song changed. Something slower. Sadder. He didn't let go. His hand slid from my waist to the small of my back. A simple movement. But it set fire to the air between us. I forgot how to breathe. We weren't dancing anymore. We were just standing, still, close. He looking at me like he already knew the ending. I should go, I whispered. He nodded. But he didn't move. Neither did I. He lifted his hand, brushing a strand of hair from my face. And in that small, deliberate motion, the world disappeared again. There was only his gaze, the soft light, and the sound of my heartbeat keeping time with the music. When the song ended, I stepped back. He didn't stop me. But as I turned away, he said, "Come back before midnight. That's when luck changes." I didn't promise I would. But both of us knew. I already had. The moment I stepped back onto the casino floor, the sound hit me like a wave. Laughter, shuffling cards, clinking glasses, the endless whir of slot machines. Everything was too bright, too loud, too alive. And I wasn't. My husband was exactly where I'd left him, surrounded by men in suits, talking about numbers that meant everything to them and nothing to me. He looked up, saw me, and smiled the way people do when they think they know you. "Where've you been?" "Just getting some air," I said. He nodded, already turning back to his conversation. I stood beside him, pretending to listen. But all I could hear was the echo of that song still playing in my head. His hands, his breath, the quiet certainty that something inside me had shifted for good. The dealer at the next table shouted all in, and chips scattered across the felt like sparks. A woman laughed too loudly, her bracelet clattering against her glass. Someone shouted for champagne. Everything pulsed with energy, but it all felt artificial. A place where people pretended to win because admitting loss would mean looking at themselves. I tried to smile, to blend back into that world. But I could still feel his hand at the small of my back. The way his voice had curled around my name without even saying it. When my husband excused himself to take a call, I followed him with my eyes until he disappeared into the crowd. And then I exhaled, long, shaky, quiet. I walked toward the exit, thinking fresh air might clear my head. But halfway there, I saw the lounge again. The light spilling through the doorway was softer, warmer. And suddenly, it didn't feel like temptation. It felt like gravity. I stopped, turned away, told myself to leave. But I caught my reflection in one of the tall casino mirrors. The shimmer of my dress, the steady rise and fall of my chest, the look in my own eyes. I didn't recognize the woman looking back. She looked like someone who'd already made a choice. Then I noticed something on the floor near the roulette table. A single gold chip, rolling lazily before stopping at my feet. I bent to pick it up. It wasn't mine. But I knew exactly who it belonged to. Midnight in a casino feels different. The air changes, softer, slower, like the night is exhaling after too many lies. The crowds thin out, but the ones who remain glow with the same desperate light in their eyes. The kind that comes from people who've already lost too much to stop now. I should have gone home. That's what I told myself while standing near the exit. Holding that single gold chip in my hand like a secret I wasn't ready to return. But my feet didn't move toward the doors. They carried me back, through the smoke, the lights, the music. Back toward the lounge. He was there. Of course he was. Sitting at the same corner table, jacket off now, shirt sleeves rolled up. A drink in front of him, untouched, again. He looked up the second I entered, like he'd been waiting for me since the moment I left. "I was starting to think you weren't coming back," he said. His voice low, warm, quiet enough to feel like it was meant only for me. "I wasn't supposed to." "I know." He smiled, slow, unhurried. "Then why are you here?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. I just set the gold chip down on the table between us. "You dropped this." He leaned forward, looked at it, then at me. "No," he said softly. "I left it." I sat down. The air around us felt heavy, too intimate for strangers, too dangerous for friends. Maybe I just wanted to thank you, I said. For what? For reminding me what it feels like to be awake. He didn't say anything, just studied me with that same steady gaze. The kind that doesn't demand, doesn't beg, just sees. The silence stretched. The jazz from the speakers faded into a slower tune. A piano, deep and smoky. The kind of song made for people who should have gone home hours ago. He reached for the chip, his fingers brushing mine as he did. The contact was brief, a spark that lasted longer than it should have. And then he placed the chip back in front of me. Your turn, he said. Make a bet. I don't play. He smiled faintly. You already are. I looked at the chip, gold gleaming under the amber light. Then at him. The silence between us became something alive, a pulse, a question, a dare. I picked it up, turned it over in my hand. And before I could stop myself, said quietly, what happens if I lose? His eyes didn't move. Then you finally stop pretending. I don't know who moved first. All I remember is that the distance between us disappeared. The smell of smoke and whiskey. His hand finding mine. My breath catching somewhere between fear and need. He stood up, holding my gaze the entire time. Then reached out a hand. Come with me. I hesitated. Just long enough to remember everything I was risking. Then I took his hand. We walked through the back corridor. Past the soundproof doors, past the laughter. Past the games I thought were dangerous until now. The hallway was dim, lined with mirrors that reflected us in fragments. Two strangers, caught between guilt and gravity. He stopped in front of a closed door, turned the handle. And for a moment, I thought about turning back. But then he looked at me. And in that gaze, there was no question left to ask. The door clicked shut behind us. And in that instant, everything else. The lights, the noise, the world. Folded into silence. The light came in slow, thin stripes of gold cutting through the curtains, painting the room in a haze that felt too gentle for what had happened. I lay still, listening to the hum of air conditioning, the distant echo of the casino below, the world continuing as if nothing had changed. But everything had. The room smelled faintly of perfume and smoke. The kind of scent that doesn't belong anywhere except in memory. His jacket was on the chair, my dress draped carelessly across it. And somewhere near the window, a single gold chip glinted in the morning light. He was sitting there, shirt half-buttoned, sleeves still rolled. Looking out at the sunrise over the city. For a second, he didn't notice I was awake. He looked calm, too calm, like someone who'd made peace with losing. When he finally turned, he smiled, that quiet, restrained smile. That somehow hurt more than any words could. Morning, he said softly. Morning, I whispered back. Neither of us moved for a long time. The silence between us wasn't awkward anymore, it was final. Like the last bet placed, the last card turned over. I sat up, pulling the sheets tighter around me. The clock on the nightstand said 7:12. My husband would still be asleep, thinking I'd stayed with friends. Or that I'd gotten home late from helping with the event. A lie so easy it made me sick. He stood, picked up his jacket, slipped it on. You don't have to explain anything, he said quietly. I wasn't planning to, I answered, and we both smiled at the honesty. He walked toward the door, stopped, and looked back. You'll forget this, he said. I wanted to tell him he was wrong. But maybe he wasn't. When the door closed behind him, the silence returned, heavier now. Like a weight pressing against my chest. I got up slowly, walked to the window. And looked down at the city below. People rushing, lights flickering. The same rhythm as always. The bed behind me was a mess of sheets and guilt. And for a fleeting moment, I felt both. The sting of shame and the strange, aching calm that comes after a storm. I picked up the gold chip from the floor. turned it over in my hand, and whispered to no one. I guess I finally learned how to play. Then I left. Not quietly, but carefully. Like someone trying to remember how to walk in her own skin again. The house was too quiet when I came home. That kind of quiet that isn't peaceful, it's hollow, echoing. Like a place that forgot how to sound alive. The morning sun slipped through the blinds, catching dust in the air. And everything looked exactly as I'd left it. Too exactly. My husband was in the kitchen, making coffee, humming off-key. He looked up when he saw me. Smiled, casual, familiar. "You're up early," he said. "Couldn't sleep," I answered. He poured a cup for me without asking. Just like he always did. Handing it over with that same gentle rhythm of routine. And that's when it hit me. How terrifying routine can be when you've broken it inside yourself. He asked about the night, about who I'd seen, how long I'd stayed. I lied easily. Too easily. Words slid out like they'd been rehearsed. And the worst part? He didn't notice. He kissed my forehead before leaving for work. The same way he always did. That kiss, so soft, so harmless. Burned more than anything that had happened hours earlier. When the door shut behind him, the silence grew thicker. The sound of the clock was unbearable. Tick, tick, tick. Counting seconds I didn't deserve to have. I wandered through the house. Past framed photos, clean counters, everything in its place. It looked like a life. But I didn't belong to it anymore. In the mirror by the hallway, I saw my reflection. Same face, same eyes. But something behind them was quieter. Not guilt. Not pride. Just awareness. I went upstairs, undressed. And stood under the shower until the water ran cold. I thought maybe it could wash something away. The scent of him, the weight of it, the tremor in my hands. But all it did was remind me that water doesn't cleanse what lies inside you. When I got out, the coffee on the counter had gone cold. I took one sip anyway, bitter, lifeless. It tasted exactly like the silence that had followed me home. That's when I realized. The real punishment wasn't the risk of being caught. It was knowing that no one ever would. He'd never ask. And I'd never tell. And somewhere in between, whatever I used to be was gone. It happened 2 weeks later. A normal day, or at least, it was supposed to be. I was at a cafe downtown, the kind of quiet place I used to love before noise became the only thing that made me feel real. Outside, the city moved at its usual rhythm, people rushing, laughing, pretending their lives made sense. Inside, everything was still. I was stirring my coffee, half listening to the chatter around me. When I felt it, that same quiet gravity, that pull that starts before you even turn your head. And then I saw him. He was sitting by the window. No suit this time, no casino glow, just a gray sweater, dark jeans, and that same calm stillness that made him impossible to ignore. For a second, I thought maybe I was imagining him. But when our eyes met, I knew, ghosts don't look back like that. He smiled, not the way he had that night, but smaller, softer. The kind of smile people give when they remember something they're not supposed to. I froze, fingers tight around my cup. Every sound in the cafe dulled, fading to a single heartbeat that didn't seem to belong to me. He stood, walked over, stopped just far enough away to be polite. "I didn't think I'd see you again," he said. "Neither did I. You look different." "Do I?" He nodded. "You look quieter." I almost laughed at that, because it was true. Something inside me had gone silent since that night. Like a part of me had stayed behind in that golden light and smoke. He gestured to the empty chair across from me. "May I?" I hesitated, then nodded. The moment he sat down, the air changed again. Not like before, not fire, not danger. Just familiarity. The kind that hurts more than thrill ever could. I tried not to think about you, I said quietly. Did it work? I shook my head. No. He smiled, that same, careful smile. Good. Then I wasn't alone. We sat there for a while, talking about nothing that mattered. Books, the weather, the dull rhythm of life. But underneath it, every word felt like a thread pulling me backward. To a place where my pulse still raced and my skin still remembered his touch. When he finished his coffee, he stood up first. I won't ask to see you again, he said. But if I ever do. He paused, searching my face. Would you stay this time? I looked down, at the coffee, at the gold light pouring through the window. I don't know, I whispered. He nodded slowly, as if he expected that answer. Then he slipped a napkin onto the table and walked away. When I opened it, there was no phone number. Just a single word, written in black ink. Always. And for the first time in weeks, I felt the ache of something that wasn't guilt, but loss. The city looked softer that evening, muted, tired, like even the sky was done pretending. I walked home slowly, the way people do when they're not sure where they actually belong. Cars passed, lights flickered, and somewhere in all that motion, I realized how quiet my life had become. When I opened the door, everything was exactly as before. The faint smell of dinner, the hum of the fridge, the sound of my husband talking on the phone in the next room. Normal. Ordinary. Perfectly fine. He smiled when he saw me, mouthed just a minute while gesturing to his call. I nodded, left my bag by the chair, and went upstairs. The stairs creaked, the same way they always did. And yet tonight, every sound felt heavier, older. In the mirror, I saw myself. Hair neatly pinned, makeup faded, eyes that looked like they'd seen something they couldn't unsee. I thought about him again, not the man himself, but what he represented. The risk. The pull. The quiet chaos that had made me feel, for one night, like I was someone who still wanted. It hit me then, I hadn't cheated because I stopped loving my husband. I cheated because I'd stopped loving myself. Somewhere between his business trips, the quiet dinners, the polite smiles, I'd turned into a version of me that only existed for someone else's comfort. Predictable. Polished. Empty. That night in the casino wasn't just temptation, it was rebellion. A desperate act of defiance against a life that looked perfect from the outside, but felt like nothing from the inside. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at my hands. The same hands that had once trembled when I touched him. Now steady, lifeless. I wanted to cry, but the tears wouldn't come. Because it wasn't sadness. It was clarity. Downstairs, I heard my husband laugh. That same warm, familiar laugh I used to love. And instead of comfort, it filled me with something strange. A kind of distant gratitude mixed with grief. I realized I didn't hate him. He hadn't done anything wrong. He'd just been there. Steady, loyal, predictable. While I quietly disappeared beside him. I looked around the room, the framed wedding photos, the books, the life we'd built. And for the first time, I saw it for what it was. A story I no longer belonged to, but didn't know how to leave. I turned off the light and sat in the dark. Listening to my own heartbeat. Feeling every echo of the choices I couldn't take back. It wasn't guilt that kept me awake that night. It was understanding. Because the truth wasn't that I cheated on him. It was that, somewhere along the way, I'd cheated myself. The next morning came without warning. No dreams, no peace, just light, harsh and honest, spilling across the room like truth you can't hide from. I sat up before the alarm, staring at the ceiling. The same ceiling I'd stared at 1,000 times before, but today, it felt closer. Heavier. My husband was still asleep beside me, one hand under the pillow, breathing steady. The picture of comfort and habit. I watched him for a while. Not with anger. Not even with guilt. Just with a strange, distant kindness. He hadn't changed. He'd never change. But I had, and pretending otherwise was starting to feel like suffocation. I got up quietly, wrapped myself in his robe. Soft, familiar, too big on me. And went downstairs. The kitchen smelled like yesterday's coffee. Everything in its place. I stood there, hands on the counter, feeling the world ask me a question I didn't want to answer. I opened the window. The air was cold, sharp, clean. The kind that makes you feel awake whether you want to or not. For the first time in weeks, I breathed all the way in. The street outside was empty. A stray cat crossed the road, slow and aimless. Someone was jogging, earphones in, lost in their own world. Life kept moving, it always does. I poured myself coffee, black this time, no sugar, no milk. It tasted bitter, but real. And for some reason, that felt right. I took out a small notebook from the drawer. One I used to write in, years ago. Before life became a list of schedules and dinner plans. The pages were still blank. I hadn't realized how long it had been since I'd written anything for myself. I opened it, pen in hand. And stared at the empty space. Then I wrote a single line. I don't know who I'm becoming, but she finally feels alive. The words looked strange, almost fragile. Like a voice I'd forgotten how to use. When I closed the notebook, I felt lighter. Not free, not yet. But no longer trapped. Upstairs, I heard him waking up, calling my name. His voice was warm, familiar. I smiled faintly, took another sip of coffee. And whispered under my breath. I'm here. Just, not where you think. It wasn't an ending. Not yet. It was the first small, quiet step back toward myself. Weeks passed, but time didn't heal anything, it only clarified. The noise around me quieted. The world looked the same, but it didn't feel the same anymore. Colors sharper. Sounds slower. Every breath carrying a small reminder that I had crossed a line I could never uncross. And yet, somehow, it had led me back to myself. Life went on with its usual rhythm. Shared breakfasts, quiet dinners, polite laughter that echoed off the walls like habit. But inside, something fundamental had shifted. The pretending was gone. I couldn't go back to being the woman who smiled because she was supposed to. Who said I'm fine because it was easier than being honest. One evening, I walked through the city alone. The same route I used to take before everything. The streets were wet from rain. The neon reflections trembling on the pavement like ghosts of choices made in secret. I stopped in front of a casino. Not that one, another, smaller, quieter. But the sound of spinning roulette, faint through the glass, made my chest tighten. I watched the people inside. Faces lit by greed, hope, fear, desire. And for the first time I didn't feel tempted. I just understood. That night wasn't about lust. It wasn't even about betrayal. It was about proof. Proof that I was still capable of feeling something real. Even if it came wrapped in guilt and danger. Sometimes, we destroy ourselves not because we want to break. But because deep down, we know we're already cracked. And the only way to start over is to let it shatter completely. I stood there for a while, watching the lights blur through the glass. Then turned and walked away. The air outside was cold, sharp, honest. It stung a little, but I liked it that way. At home, I found the gold chip still in my drawer. I held it in my palm, smooth, heavy, gleaming softly under the light. It no longer felt like a secret. It felt like a lesson. I placed it back, closed the drawer. And for the first time, it stayed closed without pulling me back in. As I turned off the lights, I whispered to myself. Not as confession, but as truth. I cheated once. But what I really did was remember who I am. And with that, I let the night take me. Not in guilt. But in quiet peace. Because some losses aren't meant to be mourned. They're meant to remind you that you were never meant to live half awake.